Today, we're diving into something pretty radical, a totally different way to think about mental health. We're going to challenge the whole idea of what it even means to get better. All right, so let's just start with a basic question. I want you to think about this for a sec. When you hear the word recover, especially when we're talking about mental illness, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm guessing for most of you, it means something like getting back to normal, right? Getting back to the person you were before. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the goal isn't just about going backward? What if this struggle itself could actually lead you somewhere better? So to really get this new idea, we've got to look at the old one first. For ages, the main goal in medicine and psychiatry was pretty straightforward. Just get things back to the way they were. There's even a Latin phrase for it, status quo ante. It literally means the way things were before. The whole point was to reverse the illness, get rid of the symptoms, and just reset the person to their factory settings, so to speak. And look, that sounds like a great goal, right? Of course it does. But maybe it's also a little short-sighted. But then, a totally new way of thinking started to take hold. A perspective that saw illness not as just a bug in the system, not a breakdown, but as, well, as a process. Something dynamic, something that could even have meaning.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this comparison. The old way, the pessimistic view, sees symptoms and says that's a defect, a breakdown. But this newer, more optimistic view looks at this same thing and says, no, that's a fight for life. It's even called a strategic retreat, like your mind pulling back to protect itself. It's a huge shift from seeing a failure to seeing a desperate fight to survive.
I love this metaphor. Symptoms aren't the fire, they're the firefighters. They're these emergency relief devices that your mind calls in to save you when the stress is just completely overwhelming. So their job isn't to make things worse, it's actually to protect you. So as we got better and better at treating people, the next logical question was, hey, can we just prevent this stuff from happening at all? This kicked off a massive focus on prevention. But it led to this really interesting paradox. The more they succeeded with individuals, the more they realized that real prevention had almost nothing to do with therapy or pills. It was about something way, way bigger. So what does that even look like, preventing mental illness? Well, it turns out it's not some magic pill. It's the big stuff, the foundations of a healthy society. Things like kids feeling safe with their parents, having good schools, places to play, stable families, even just being able to go to a museum or walk in nature. And here's the rub. Investing in all that, that's a huge long-term project for society. And you know what happens? It gets brushed off as being too expensive, or people call these things luxuries, when really, they are absolutely essential to public health. Let's be honest, it's way easier to get funding for a new drug than it is for a new playground. So this whole prevention idea kind of hit a brick wall because it meant changing society's priorities in a massive way. And people just weren't ready for that. Okay, so this brings us to the core idea here, the really mind-blowing part of this whole thing. What if recovery isn't just about getting well? What if it's about becoming weller than well? That's the phrase they use. The idea that the struggle itself can be the very thing that sparks incredible growth. This quote just nails it. The idea that someone can go through hell and come out the other side not just healed, but completely transformed. They might find new talents, new kinds of strength, a whole new way of being effective in the world that they just didn't have before. And this isn't just a theory. Let's look at some amazing real-life examples. First up, a name we all know, but maybe a side of him we don't. Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was known to have these crippling bouts of depression. I mean, we're talking severe. People around him were genuinely worried. His own law partner called him a hopeless victim of melancholy. His future wife's relatives literally thought he might be insane. But here's the kicker. Before he went through this, he was just a lawyer. A good one, sure, but not exactly a legend. Everything we remember him for, his entire legacy, all of it came after he wrestled with those demons. You could say the struggle is what made him into the Lincoln we know. Okay, next example, the famous philosopher John Stuart Mill. He had his own crisis when he was a young man. He was only 20, and he fell into this massive depression. He got completely obsessed with this one thought. What if I get everything I've ever wanted, and I'm still not happy? Imagine that. It was this huge existential crisis that just broke him. But what came out of it? A totally new philosophy. He had this breakthrough. You don't find happiness by chasing it for yourself. You find it as a side effect when you focus on making other people happy, on making the world better. That single idea, which came directly from his pain, changed everything for him. And for our last example, let's talk about one of the founding fathers of American psychology, a man who basically had to get lost in his own mind before he could map it for the rest of us, William James. James went through this period of just terrifying anxiety. He had suicidal thoughts. He described waking up every single morning with this horrible dread, feeling like he was staring into this pit of insecurity that everyone else just seemed to walk right past, totally unaware. And yet, that experience, that raw personal journey through suffering, became the bedrock of his entire career. I love how his biographer put it, that the illness developed the bed in which the stream of his philosophic life was to flow. It was his pain that gave him this incredible, deep understanding of what it means to be human, an understanding he would spend his entire life unpacking. So, what's the common thread here? It all comes down to hope, but not just passively wishing things will get better. We're talking about hope as an active ingredient, a force that actually keeps you going. You know that old saying, where there's life, there's hope? Well, the source material for this does something so cool, it flips it right on its head. It says, no, no, no. Life is sustained by hope, meaning where there is hope, there is life. Hope isn't just some nice thing you have when you're alive. It's the very fuel that keeps you alive. And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. This whole idea isn't just a history lesson about famous dead guys. It's a completely new lens for looking at our own lives. It's an invitation to ask ourselves, what potential for growth, what potential for becoming weller than well is hiding inside our own challenges?